In the north, as much as the south will be struggling with its new identity, this is the same for the north, and this was also mentioned by one of the speakers already. So the internal cohesion is going to be a major issue, and center-periphery conflicts are going to be popping up as they have been, but this is going to be even reinforced as the economic situation takes a clear downturn. The north will be losing 60% of its income in terms of the oil, much higher even in terms of its foreign currency income, and this at the time when the internal tensions also within the NCP are significantly building up. And where previously center-periphery issues were resolved by basically providing support, particularly financial support to specific groups and individuals, that money simply won't be there anymore. So it'll be much more difficult to control these type of conflicts. What we see in Darfur already are shifting alliances between different groups, very unlikely alliances coming up of people who previously were fighting each other, but actually now the unifying factor is the center and is the NCP. And this is a very risky venture in the sense that these alliances are on a negative basis, not on a positive basis. They know what they don't want. They are not particularly clear of what they want and where they want to go, other than getting rid of the NCP. There are, again, as a result of the lack of arrangement within the CPA on nationality citizenship issues, likely to be downturns in terms of the relationship with the populations other than the northern and Arabic population. So we need to very much look at this also as a potential source of further displacement. And in the north, so far, the relationship between Chad and Sudan has held, but we don't know, again, what dynamics is going to come in as a result of what's happening in Libya and the playing itself out of the NCP in that regard. Now, in terms of population movements, I'll try to speed up a bit here. What we are foreseeing in terms of our planning scenarios is in Darfur targeted displacement. Specific population and tribal groups are being displaced at the moment, and this will further increase in terms of when we advance into the future. Some of the displacement has become very long-term and actually is more characterized as urbanization, and we should really look at Darfur in terms of a new reality, whereby it's unlikely that the large numbers of people now displaced around towns and cities are going to go back to their places of origin, but rather will be settling around towns and cities. And though we're all talking about this, we need to translate it into concrete programming and concrete approaches, developmental approaches, and nobody is really doing that at this point in time as yet. In terms of the south, we'll see frequent displacement, in our opinion, but this is mostly short-term. We see a very limited absorptive capacity, particularly in towns and cities in the south, but also in the rural areas, which again makes for major investment being very necessary. And we also foresee a major influx into the south from Darfur. And after the 9th of July, these will be refugees, not IDPs anymore. And that could take on a dynamic of its own, also a highly politicized dynamic, I should say, with the possibility of some of the camps in the south having the same political dynamics as we're now seeing in Darfur, i.e. militarized, isolated, inaccessible, etc. On Khartoum, increase of urban flows, we're already seeing that as a result of the situation in Libya. There's pressure on us to, for instance, return some of the asylum seekers and refugees that passed through East Sudan and that were on our way to Europe, got stuck in the north, and now, obviously, some of the powers that be would like to see these people coming back to Sudan, which is not really something that we're advocating very strongly in UNHCR. Outflow, backflow of foreigners. Outflow of foreigners is clear, and Jerry will talk about that in a moment in much more detail. But we see the first backflows already. It's very interesting. People who tried to make it in the south went back, didn't find what they were expecting, and actually starting to trickle back towards Khartoum. The numbers are in the hundreds, but it's a very worrying trend and something we need to take very seriously. Last point I wanted to make is that the asylum regime is likely to deteriorate as a result of the situation of the North-South relations, and the more problematic the relationship between the two countries is, I think the more hostility we can expect in terms of the asylum regime up in the north. East Sudan, we continue to see an influx of about 2,000 Eritreans a month, and this is unfortunately not likely to stop. Now, from here, I want to go to some of the more positive and cross-cutting, forward-looking issues. First of all, in terms of the durable solutions that we are pursuing for both the displaced populations and returnees, very important to look very early on at livelihoods. Relief is something we're very good at. What we're not very good at is to look at livelihoods, particularly in an urban context. It takes much more investment, time, expertise, which is not necessarily there on the ground. The capacity certainly is not there in the south to deal with these large numbers of returnees. But likewise, in Darfur, we've been very good at looking at displacement, relief, but not at durable solutions, both in urban and in the rural context. Because again, let's not forget, in Darfur, a large number of these people are not going to go back to the rural areas. And a new reality somehow will have to be created. The Darfur of 20 years ago or even 10 years ago is never going to come back. And that reality translates into a real coordinated developmental approach once the situation permits there. Whether we are talking north, south, whether we're talking urban or rural, land tenure issues are going to be major issues that pertain to both displacement and particularly durable solutions. So that's not only, again, advocacy and studies, but actually addressing that with concrete programs. Peace building, fostering coexistence, obviously large-scale returns, particularly to areas where people are not necessarily that welcome, and we see already the first signs of that happening in some of the areas in the south. That's a clear, important focus of our programs. The pastoralist and nomadic populations, potential spoilers in the conflict, need to be taken into account and need to be very much given the attention and the due resources that they require and deserve. Our approaches should not be aimed at our beneficiaries per se, but at the communities around them, so that people truly integrate and that nobody feels left out or particularly benefiting over and above other groups. And the last point is again self-evident. Now, ownership by both the Republic of South Sudan and the government of Sudan of solutions, absolutely key, seems very logical, but is not necessarily our starting point in our approaches. So let's not let them get away with simply calling on the international community to do stuff, but clearly put up front that we're expecting things to happen, whether it is in terms of facilitation, resolving land tenure issues, or otherwise, resources, that is. Accountability, up front, north, south, clear, and international community needs to be very much engaged and very consistent in terms of its approach. And we need to look at particularly at the non-traditional donors like the Arab League, who are sometimes on a different line than we are in terms of these type of issues and the flow of resources. So I think I have one more slide which disappeared, okay. So as in terms of conclusions, maybe let me just give a few messages to you. We'll be looking up ahead at two entities that are both looking for an identity, but that are not necessarily dealing with, we're not necessarily dealing with internal coherence. So we need to very much stand by them in terms of building that coherence, in terms of supporting them, in terms of particularly empowering the periphery and a decentralized structure of administration. So our program should be aiming not at the federal central level, but at the state level or even beyond that.